So it's sunset, just over 29 degrees and 33% humidity over on the warmer side. I'm just going to give it a little very gentle watering just over here, just so that Mr. Jinx does get a little thirsty. You can access a bit of water. It doesn't need that much. Just a little bit of a spray. So, in response to a question that I had on one of my YouTube videos about thermostats and halogen bulbs and power density. So, now that I know more about power density, which is like the amount of radiation coming from a bulb, or in nature, the amount of radiation coming from the sun. And if we break down that radiation into smaller parts, so if you imagine it as like an umbrella spectrum, and you have one part of the umbrella which is UV light, and then you get the irradiation emissions coming from that, which we measure through a UVI meter. And then you have another part of the umbrella which is visible light, which is the light that we can see, as in what humans can see. There is a part of light which geckos can see as well, but humans can, and that goes into a little bit more complicated science, and I'm not quite sure on that, so I'm not going to talk about that. I think it's something to do with like peripheral vision, or anyway. And then there's another part of the umbrella which is IR, so infrared. And what was I? So yeah, so that is kind of measured. So those components are measured, hang on, using meters, which measures the power, basically. So we have the solar radiance meter for the IR, we have the UVI meter for the UV, and we have the lux meter, which measures the intensity of lumens through lux, okay, which gives us a sort of reading for the strength of the visible light. And then all of those combined make up those wavelengths of power coming from the incandescent bulb or a heat projector, or like the sun in the wild. So basically, in a nutshell, this is like the sun. The sun in wild is overhead, it's in the sky, it's above, so it's casting rays of light downwards onto the earth, and then that light energy will bounce. Now bear in mind, this light is going to go off any second, get into that time. So yeah, without further ado, I've given a little spray misting. So in response to the thermostat question, do I use a thermostat? Yes, I do. It's a dimming thermostat, and it's just a simple manual dial one. And it is set on full power at the moment. So why do I have a thermostat? Why do I have this particular thermostat, like a dimming thermostat? So I've had this now for well over 2 years, and it's been working absolutely fine. I think the fuse went on it one time, which is normal, and just buy a set of fuses and replace it. So that's totally normal. But yeah, it works totally fine for me, because I don't like things too complicated and technical. So it works fine with the dial. And what I was doing last year was coming. So when it was like the transition of the seasons, I would be using the same bulb throughout the year, I think, or most of the year. And I would simply dim the thermostat, which would then decrease the power of the bulb, which would also decrease the temperature in the terrarium. So that's what I was doing last year. This year, I'm going to do it a little bit differently, by reducing the temperature simply by changing bulbs. Because this is a 75 watt, and it's, you know, with the IR wavelengths and visible light, which also gives off heat coming off that light and bouncing off the solid ground below and the rocks and whatnot, that increases the ambient temperature. Okay. But as, say, we head towards November, I'll change down that wattage bulb to maybe a 60 watt. And then as the months head towards the winter solstice, I'll go right down to something like a 40 watt, or even lower, but have it on full power, and it'll still reduce the temperatures in the daytime, and at night time the temperatures will be cold again because there's no like supplemental heating at night time. Okay. So why do I use a dimming thermostat? Well, it's a fail safe. So if, you know, the terrarium was, so let's just say now on a heat wave day where it got to really warm outside, say above 30 Celsius, let's just say. The thermostat, and say if the temperature was set on the thermostat to say 28 degrees, the terrarium with the room temperature and the temperature outside and with the bulb, it would get too hot, potentially dangerously hot. So then the thermostat would kick in and dim the light from the bulb. Or if it's, too hot, it would even turn it, dim it right down to almost nothing. And when those temperatures start reducing, it'll dim slowly back on again. That does not happen very, very often at all, really. It's only when there's a heat wave, or if it's like really cold in the room during the winter and I've got the thermostat set to a low setting to kind of mimic the winter climate. So say if the thermostat is set to 15 Celsius, the bulb may dim a little bit, to sort of maintain the sort of temperature that's set. But that dimming kind of mimics like the sunlight going behind a cloud, and it only dims for like a matter of seconds, maybe a minute, or so. Just it depends, but it kind of makes it seem quite natural. Whereas if it was connected to a mat stat, like an on-off thermostat, not a mat stat, sorry, don't use them with these bulbs. So if it was connected to an on-off thermostat, you wouldn't get the dimming, so you wouldn't get the natural kind of lightness of the sun going behind the cloud. So that's kind of why I use the dimming thermostat, is simply for those two reasons. One, it's a good enough fail-safe, and two, it does mimic sunlight disappearing behind a cloud. And it doesn't, when it does dim, it doesn't last long anyway. So it only happens occasionally. Most of the year, it's on at full power. Okay. So go into this kind of thing which has been talked about a lot in husbandry. Um, if you dim a halogen light bulb, it will lower the proportion of wavelengths, the strength. I can see that being true, really. I can see the logic behind that, because if the bulb is on full power and gets dimmed, then those wavelengths of energy aren't going to be as strong, or the power density is not going to be as strong. Does that matter for me? No, because I have a leopard gecko which is mostly crepuscular and sleeps under his rocks or what have you during the daytime and comes out during twilight. Occasionally he does come out in the daytime, and he has occasionally before come out to have a drink during the peak hours a day. But that's rare for a leopard gecko. If you have another species, like let's use a bearded dragon or something like that for an example of a daylight basking loving species, then dimming the power of the bulb may affect its functioning slightly, because you're dimming the power of the bulb. So what I would advise probably is, even though I don't have a hell of a lot of experience keeping bearded dragons, is just simply getting a lower wattage bulb and having it on full power. And if you want to replicate winter, when it's colder anyway, and when most reptiles hibernate, I would just say get a lower wattage bulb, and have it on full power. Have it set on full power on the thermostat, if that makes sense. Yeah. And see how that works. Rather than doing what I did last year, having one bulb throughout, say, I don't know, 10 months of the year, and then switching to a lower wattage bulb in the sort of peak of winter. I think what I'm going to do is do it gradual and have maybe 3 different bulbs, one for autumn and spring, one for summer, which would be the strongest, most powerful bulb, and then one for winter, which will be the weakest one. Okay. And then have those connected to the lamp, which is connected to the thermostat, and set it at a sort of a relevant temperature on the thermostat appropriate to the season, if that makes sense. I mean, my thermostat has been set at 35 pretty much since March, because over in their wild habitat, for most of the year, it's above 30 degrees. So that's the reason I have it on there. If you have a bearded dragon, their native habitat is in Australia, so I can imagine over there most of the year it's above 30 degrees, so it'd be kind of a similar situation, I guess. But do look it up before you go out and buy stuff. So that's kind of like the reasoning why I use my thermostat. Now with the probe, so thermostats are attached to a sensor probe, which connected to the wire of the thermostat, and then it can to go into the terrarium. Now some people place it on the warm side, others place it on the cool side. I place mine on the cool side, and I think that's because I'm not sure if I'm going to get this right, but the logic behind that is the thermal sort of gradient can sort of travel through from the warm end, yeah? So the warm side gets warm, but with the thermostat set on the cooler end, it sort of maintains a little bit the cooler temperature on this side, if that makes sense. So then if this side was to get to 30 degrees Celsius, then the thermostat would dim dim the light. So it would sense the temperature on this side. So the probe is sort of sat on the rock by there. So it would pick up the temperature, yeah, and then it would basically say, well, look, Mr. Thermostat, you need to turn the bulb down, and then it would do so, yeah. If the probe was placed on the warm side, then the dimming is going to be happening a lot more often because it's going to be hitting that 30 degrees anyway, much quickly. So then there'd be a much more of a disco happening because so I would say the correct place to put your thermostat probe is on the cooler side. So that's pretty much it, guys. Mr. Jinx, he's definitely slowing down. But having said that, he is a little bit out and about now. I can see that he's due to have a shed. He's looking very pale skinned. He's probably having a little drink. Yeah, he is. He's licking, you can see he's licking the leaves there, look. So after me just spray misting, he's just licking the droplets of moisture to sort of keep him going. And I reckon in another sort of week, 2 weeks, he'll be hibernating then for the winter. So yeah, so that is all for tonight, folks. I hope that has answered the question, re the thermostat and the sort of swapping around of bulbs and whatnot. If you do have any further questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Yeah, so thanks for watching, and see you soon. Bye now.